أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ياسين والقرآن الحكيم إنك لمن المرسلين على صراط مستقيم تنزيل العزيز الرحيم لتنذر قوما ما أنذر آباؤهم فهم غافلون لقد حق القول على أكثرهم فهم لا يؤمنون إنا جعلنا في أعناقهم أغلالا فهي إلى الأذقان فهم مقمحون وجعلنا من بين أيديهم سدا ومن خلفهم سدا فأغشيناهم فهم لا يبصرون وسواء عليهم أأنذرتهم أم لم تنذرهم لا يؤمنون إنما تنذر من اتبع الذكرى وخشي الرحمن بالغيب فبشره بمغفرة وأجر كريم إنا نحن نحيي الموتى ونكتب ما قدموا وآثارهم وكل شيء أحصيناه في إمام مبين واضرب لهم مثلا أصحاب القرية إذ جاءها المرسلون إذ أرسلنا إليهم اثنين فكذبوهما فعززنا بثالث فقالوا إنا إليكم مرسلون قالوا ما أنتم إلا بشر مثلنا وما أنزل الرحمن من شيء إن أنتم إلا تكذبون قالوا ربنا يعلم إنا إليكم لمرسلون وما علينا إلا البلاغ المبين قالوا إنا تطيرنا بكم لئن لم تنتهوا لنرجمنكم وليمسنكم منا عذاب أليم قالوا طائركم معكم أئن ذكرتم بل أنتم قوم مسرفون وجاء من أقصى المدينة رجل يسعى قال يا قوم اتبعوا المرسلين اتبعوا من لا يسألكم أجرا وهم مهتدون وما لي لا أعبد الذي فطرني وإليه ترجعون أأتخذ من دونه آلهة إن يردني الرحمن بضر لا تغني عني شفاعتهم شيئا ولا ينقذون إني إذا لفي ضلال مبين إني آمنت بربكم فاسمعون قيل ادخل الجنة قال يا ليت قومي يعلمون بما غفر لي ربي وجعلني من المكرمين. صدق الله العلي العظيم وصدق رسوله الكريم. أفلح من صلى على محمد وآل محمد.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بفضل الله بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وأفضل الصلاة وأزكى التسليم على المبعوث رحمة للعالمين سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. واللعن الدائم على أعدائهم أجمعين من لدن آدم إلى قيام يوم الدين. آمين رب العالمين. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Holy Quran, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا إن أكرمكم عند الله أتقاكم إن الله عليم خبير. O mankind, indeed we have created you from male and female and made you peoples and tribes that you may know one another. Indeed, the most noble of you in the sight of Allah is the most righteous of you. Indeed, Allah is knowing and acquainted. آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. It is important for each and every one of us to have the proper characteristics in order to achieve whatever we like in this dunya. And most of the time we avoid attending places because maybe we do not have enough characteristics that makes us eligible to be in that place, or that makes us eligible to be part of a social group, for example. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He sent the messenger, He sent certain teachings that removes the obstacles that were there in the time of the Jahiliyyah, that made the people struggle in order to acquire the characteristics that are considered at that time are the characteristics that needed in order to make someone eligible for something. But one characteristic, as the title of the lecture today, eligibility for anything. This characteristic is supposed to give each and every one of us, taken the community that is supposed to be provided, that makes us eligible. What? Before that, a quick introduction. And of course, we have to pay respect to the occasion that we are commemorating these days, which is the martyrdom of Fatima al-Zahra salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayha. لذكرها صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. It was narrated by Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam that he said, لولا أن خلق الله أمير المؤمنين عليه السلام لما كان لفاطمة كفء آدم فمن دونه. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not create Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi, no one would be equivalent to Fatima alayha salam, even if it is Adam and whoever is after Adam salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi. There's two major understandings of this narration. The first understanding that we are going to discuss is the one that we are going to derive a lesson from. The one that is related to the verse that I started with, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Holy Quran, إِنَّ أَكْرَمَكُمْ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ أَتْقَاكُمْ. The most noble of you in the eyes of Allah is the one who is more righteous, the one who is more pious. So the first understanding of this hadith, a lot of people when they hear that if Allah did not create Amir al-Mu'mineen, no one would be equivalent to Fatima, they read it as if the Imam is saying no one would be eligible to marry Fatima al-Zahra salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayha. Al-kafa'a, when someone is kufa, it can mean that I'm eligible for something. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So in order to understand eligibility for marriage, we go back to the jurisprudential teachings of our ulama. What are the conditions and what are the characteristics that are supposed to be provided in a person so he can be eligible to get married to any girl? Or what are the characteristics that are supposed to be provided in any girl for her to be eligible to marry any man? So, two main conditions that are mentioned. The first condition is Iman, being a mu'min, being a person who believes in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, believes in this religion. And this condition is the major one. And having differences in the level of Iman between the spouses, it's not a condition. Let's say someone is more religious than my daughter, or my daughter is more religious than this person. Is that a reason to refuse someone? Is that a reason to change my mind from proposing to someone because she's not as religious as I am? She doesn't pray Salatul Layl, or I do not, or the man doesn't pray Salatul Layl, the man doesn't perform the mustahab prayers. Is that enough for me to refuse someone who's proposing to my daughter or to my sister? Or is that enough reason for me to be refused if I propose to someone? No, it is not. As long as I have the Iman, this characteristic, then I achieved 50% of the conditions that are supposed to be available in me to be eligible to get married. The second condition is yusr, having the ability to accommodate. To accommodate. If I'm able to provide what's important for the wife, as in the shelter, as in the food, as in everything that is considered major in the life. And when I say yusr, it's not the wealth. Being wealthy is not a condition. Being wealthy in shara', in fiqh, is when someone has what is enough to accommodate for the whole year. Either it is present with him in his pocket, or he achieves it like month by month when I work. And this is the same ruling when it comes to paying the khums. Who do I give the khums to? Who is considered poor, shar'an? The man or the woman that doesn't have the accommodation for a whole year, either bil-fi'l or right now, or bil-quwwa. Someone who doesn't have it, like if he doesn't work or the work is not enough. So two main conditions is what? Iman, having faith, having Iman, believing in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and yusr, having the ability to accommodate. These are the main two conditions that we should look at when it comes to eligibility in marriage. But nowadays, we see that Rasulullah planted these, and the other characteristics and conditions were abandoned from the time of the Jahiliyyah through the religion of Islam. But we see nowadays we changed it and we took it back to the time of the Jahiliyyah. Instead of holding on to these characteristics, hold on to these conditions of eligibility, we start to change ourselves. I will give you an example. Inshallah, after that we will apply it on our daily life after Salat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. There is a famous story of a poor man. His name is Juwaybir. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi had built like an awning outside of the masjid. That awning used to provide a shelter for these strangers, people who used to come to Medina, who do not have money, who do not have any support, who come from tribes that are far away or do not have any tribes at all. They used to come and sleep in that awning. They used to live there. And Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, after every now and then, he used to provide them with food, with water, with dates, with whatever. And the rest of the Muslimin used to do the same as Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi used to do. One of the people who stayed in that awning, his name was Juwaybir. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi approached him and he said to him, "Don't you want to get married so this wife can help you in the matters of the dunya and can help you with your religion?" Then Juwaybir looked at Rasulullah and he said, Ya Rasulullah, who would accept me as a spouse? I have no hasab, no like elite lineage. I have no tribe. I look ugly. I have no money. And then Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi said this, and this is very important, dear brothers and sisters. He said, إن الله قد وضع بالإسلام من كان في الجاهلية شريفا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through Islam, put down and downgraded those who used to be considered elite in the time of the Jahiliyyah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through Islam, elevated those who used to be considered in the time of the Jahiliyyah low lives. وأذهب بالإسلام ما كان من نخوة الجاهلية وتفاخرها بعشائرها. And this Islam, this religion, eliminated the conditions that were supposed to be, the conditions that used to be considered, that gives eligibility to the person in any social relationship, which are the tribal ta'assub, to the tribal extremism, to the tribals, being wealthy or being from a certain race or certain color. فالناس اليوم كلهم, today people, all of them, the white and the dark, the Qarashi from Quraysh, and the Arabs and the non-Arabs are from Adam, and Adam خلقه الله من طين, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created Adam from mud. And the most beloved people to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the day of judgment are the most pious. And O Juwayber, I know no one amongst the Muslimin who's better than you in piety, who's better than you, except if they are more pious than you. And then he told him, Juwayber, go to Ziyad ibn Lubayd, who was one of the head of the tribes of the Ansar. He had a beautiful girl, a beautiful daughter. Her name was al-Dhalfa. He said, and tell him that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi sent me to you, and he tells you to accept me as your son-in-law. And then Juwayber took this message to Ziyad ibn Lubayd, and he was sitting amongst people. He said to him, I am the messenger of Allah to you. And he sent a message with me to deliver something to you. Would you allow me to say it to you in secret? He said, no, these are my people, you can say it out loud. He said, Rasulullah tells me that أن تزوج ابنتك الذلفاء من جويبر, to accept Juwayber as a husband for your daughter al-Dhalfa. And of course Ziyad ibn Lubayd didn't believe. And he said to Juwayber, he said, go back to Rasulullah and tell him that we do not accept a spouse for our daughters except if he was from the Ansar. The condition that makes him eligible to marry my daughter is that he has to be from the Ansar, from this elite tribe. Then Juwayber went and he was upset. And he said, ما بهذا نزل الإسلام. This is not what the Islam brought. And this is not what the Quran brought. And who heard Juwayber? The daughter, al-Dhalfa. And then she asked her father to call him back. And then she said to him that Juwayber wouldn't lie on behalf of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. And then Ziyad ibn Lubayd, he went himself to Rasulullah and he made sure that Rasulullah said that. And then al-Dhalfa and Juwayber got married, and the father provided everything, accommodated everything for his son-in-law. The house, the best furniture, and the best food. And of course the narration is long and we can derive a lot of lessons from it. But nowadays, the situation is not like that. The men are not as ugly as Juwayber or as poor as Juwayber, and the girls are not as beautiful as al-Dhalfa. And we still see that the youth are struggling. Juwayber, what did he have that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi himself vouched for him? He had the iman, he had piety, he had deen. And if you want to apply on everything else, nowadays, as I mentioned, we changed the conditions, the characteristics that are supposed to be provided to make someone eligible for anything. Let us say, I want to join a group of friends. I have to dress in a certain way. Instead of sticking to the teachings of Islam and sticking to the conditions that are provided by this religion, I have to change myself to be accepted in that group. If I want my son not to be bullied at school, or if I want my son or my daughter to be accepted in the friends, they have to have PlayStation. They have to have the latest game. Otherwise, they won't have anything in common. Instead, what I can do, I stick to my teachings. And then I make sure that the people that I socialize with are the people who share something with my children, the teachings that I teach them. And instead of changing my name and the way I dress and the way I look in order to be accepted in a group of friends, I look for the people who have the same standards that I do. Because nowadays we don't see the value of these standards. And I mentioned on Thursday night the story of Ayman. And there's, because I didn't mention it in English, I will mention it again after Salat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Same thing, Ayman is a holy lady that supported Fatima al-Zahra. She was one of the people who didn't fear the monstrosity of the enemies of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Those who attacked the house of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Those who killed the fetus. So those who attacked the wife of Amir al-Mu'mineen and the daughter of Rasulullah. She didn't fear them. And then she went with Fatima al-Zahra and she was a witness that the land of Fadak is hers. Who was Ayman? Ayman was a 10-year-old girl that was captured, that was a captive after Abraha came and attacked the Kaaba with his elephants. And how the birds came with the hijarat min sijil, the rocks, and killed the elephants and killed the men. Who was left was the women and children who came with the army of Abraha. She was 10 years old when Abdul Muttalib took her and he owned her, like at the time of slavery. And then she grew older and she was a help to Amina, the mother of Rasulullah. And she looked after the Prophet when he was 5 years old. Until she was 37, she was serving Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But she was attached to the Prophet in the sense that she believed in him. And then when she was 37, Rasulullah freed her. And then she married a man from Medina, from Mecca, who died. And then her son was Ayman, who died as well, who was martyred in the battle of Hunayn. And then she married, when her husband died, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi went up on the minbar and he said, if anyone would like to marry a woman that is from heaven, come and marry Ayman. And of course, no one would go. Even that Rasulullah announced that she is of the inhabitants of heaven. No one came up. No one, because they had the same standards that we have nowadays in being eligible to a social relationship. And then one person came, Zayd ibn Haritha, who was a slave once and who was gifted to Rasulullah by Sayyidah Khadija, and he married her, and then she gave birth to Usama. Usama, who was the messenger of Rasulullah, who led the army. And then Rasulullah said about him that may Allah curse those who will fall short and not follow the army of Usama. So having that characteristic, piety, relationship to the ma'soom, the love to the infallible, following the teachings of this religion, and if you notice, achieving these standards nowadays to be eligible to anything is very hard. And it requires a lot of effort to be wealthy. It requires a lot of effort to have a certain car. It requires a lot of money in order to achieve eligibility to be a husband or to be a friend or to be whatever in a business. But the teachings that Islam brought, it doesn't require any effort. It doesn't require effort not to be honest or to be kind or to be trustworthy or to be religious. You can buy heaven with just half an hour of your day to pray on time. You can buy heaven, something that ما لا عين رأت ولا أذن سمعت. So this is the only characteristic that should make us eligible for anything, given the needed community. If I start from myself, that to make this is the main purpose that I have to achieve, and then I meet with people that have the same goal, and then we make a community like that, then I'm eligible for anything. I have now healthy friends for my kids, healthy friends for myself, a good wife if I choose properly according to these conditions. And if the woman chooses properly, she will have a good husband according to these conditions. And if you look at it in every way possible, even when it comes to work, the way I gain my work in my daily life is through attending the Ja'fariyya, through my friends. And it's still benefiting me up until now. So this is the only main characteristic that should make me eligible for anything. But is that the major understanding of this narration? When we spoke about if Allah did not create Amir al-Mu'mineen, no one would be equivalent to Fatima al-Zahra salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So when it comes to this narration, it's not talking about eligibility of marrying Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam. Even if we want to look at it in that understanding, we see that Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam, someone would ask, well, these two major conditions that you mentioned, Iman and Yusr, ability to accommodate, were they not provided in Adam or anyone after Adam? So why Amir al-Mu'mineen only? We say that certain rulings in Islam can be broken with certain individuals. There is a major ruling for every Muslim that the maximum amount of wives that you can have is 4, except in Australia, you can have only 1. But with Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, it was broken, this rule. He could have 9. He could have more than 4. And there is a ruling that is for every Muslim that the major conditions that are supposed to be provided in a spouse is Iman and Yusr, ability to accommodate, except with Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam. There is a third condition that this person has to be Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi. The second understanding of the hadith, which is separated from the first topic, I chose to divide the lecture into 2, to take a lesson and then speak about the occasion, because 2 days ago we commemorated the martyrdom of Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam, and it is important for us to know who this lady is and what is the status of this lady. Because nowadays after we saw the community comparing between the Ma'soom and the non-Ma'soom, we saw that nowadays they are comparing between the tragedies of other than Ahlul Bayt with the tragedies of Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam. Where people started to say that now we see the attack on the house of Fatima al-Zahra again, and the attack on Mohsen again, and a lot of Mohsens fell on the ground. And the truth is, Al-Imam al-Hasan al-Askari alayhi salam says, Inna Ahlul Baytin la yuqasu bina ahad. That us Ahlul Bayt, no one can be compared to us. If that servant didn't even comprehend the status of the necklace of Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam, how can we claim to understand the status of Fatima al-Zahra herself? That necklace that was gifted to her, and then a beggar came to Rasulullah in the masjid, and he was complaining about him being poor, having no money, having no family, he's estranged, he can't go back to his home country. And then Rasulullah told him, I have nothing to give you, but I will guide you to a house that will give you what you need. And he guided him to the house of Fatima al-Zahra. The man went to the house of Fatima al-Zahra and he asked, and she gave him her necklace. He went back to the masjid. He said, Ya Rasulullah, this is what I got from your daughter Fatima. And then Rasulullah said, who would buy this necklace? Ammar ibn Yasir said, I will buy this necklace. Ammar ibn Yasir bought the necklace, gave the money to the man, and he gave him food and water, and he gave him a camel that will help him to go back to his home country. And then he sent the necklace with the slave that he had to Rasulullah and said to him, this is a gift to you. Then Rasulullah said, the slave and the necklace will go back to Fatima alayhi salam. The slave went holding the necklace to the house of Fatima. He knocked at the door, he gave her the necklace, and then she said to him, you are free to go. That slave started to cry. She said to him, what's wrong with you? He said, I'm surprised with something that I didn't know its value. This necklace is so astonishing. This necklace fed a hungry man and quenched the thirst of a thirsty man, and allowed the man to go back to his family, and went back to its owner and freed a slave. So The second reading of this narration is not talking about the eligibility of marriage, because Imam Sadiq wouldn't use Prophet Adam as an example, because Prophet Adam, the narration says, Adam famandun, no one would be equivalent to Fatima al-Zahra from Adam up until the rest of the people, until the day of judgment, because Adam is the grandfather of Fatima al-Zahra salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi. What is the meaning of that? لولا أن خلق الله أمير المؤمنين. If Allah did not create Amir al-Mu'mineen, no one would be equal to Fatima salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. So in order to understand the status of Fatima, we have to understand the status of Amir al-Mu'mineen. In Ghazwat Tabuk, in the year 9th of Al-Hijrah, when Rasulullah went in that battle, and he left Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali alayhi salam behind. And a lot of people started to talk about Amir al-Mu'mineen. Some started to say that Rasulullah, he got bored from Ali and he left him behind. Some said that Amir al-Mu'mineen became weak and he didn't want to share in the war. And then Amir al-Mu'mineen got upset and he came to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi and he said to him, look at what the people are saying about me. Then Rasulullah said to Amir al-Mu'mineen, أما ترضى يا علي أن تكون مني بمنزلة هارون من موسى. Doesn't it satisfy you, O Ali, that you would be to me like Harun, how he was to Moses alayhi salam? And then we look at the Quran. What is the status of Harun in relationship to Musa alayhi salam? We read in the Quran, وَاجْعَلْ لِي وَزِيرًا مِنْ أَهْلِ. When the Prophet asks Allah, وَاجْعَلْ لِي وَزِيرًا مِنْ أَهْلِ, a representative from my family. Who is that? Harun akhi. So Ali, the same as how Harun was a wazir to Rasulullah, Ali was a wazir. The same way how Harun was a brother to Musa alayhi salam, then Ali was a brother to Rasulullah. Ushdud bihi azri, support my back through him. Then Amir al-Mu'mineen was as well the support. Ashrikhu fi amri, as the Quran says, make him my sharik, my partner in my matter, in my amr. What is the meaning of that? The same way when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks to Moses and Harun together, and he gives them the same responsibility, he says, both of you go to Fir'aun, both of you tell Fir'aun. The same way Amir al-Mu'mineen salawatullahi wa salam alayhi was with Rasulullah. And we look at the Quran, that Rasulullah, when he spoke about Amir, he says, إِنَّمَا أَنْتَ مُنذِرٌ, you are merely a warner. And he pointed to his chest and he said, وَلِكُلِّ قَوْمٍ هَادٍ, and for every nation there is a guidance. And he pointed to the chest of Amir al-Mu'mineen salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. So, since Harun was the best man after Moses alayhi salam, we realize that Ali is the man after Rasulullah. Rasulullah is the best of the creation of Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala. And then he says to Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ya Ali, no one knows me except for Allah and you. Then we realize that Amir al-Mu'mineen is exactly and directly after Rasulullah and better than all of the prophets. And since the narration says, if Allah did not create Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib, no one would be equivalent to Fatima. We say that Fatima is equal to Amir al-Mu'mineen salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. If we have no evidence that proves that Ali is better than Fatima, then Fatima would be exactly equal to Amir al-Mu'mineen. And because we have narrations that proves that Ali is better than Fatima, we realize that Rasulullah is the best of the creation. Then next comes Amir al-Mu'mineen. Then third comes Fatima al-Zahra, better than all the prophets salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhim. Salli ala Muhammad wa alihi. Salman looks upon Rasulullah when he was sitting in the presence of Al-Hasan and Al-Husayn, and he says to him, Ya Rasulullah, who is the best of the creation? He said, the grandfather of these two. And he said, then who? He said, the father of these two. He said, then who? He said, the mother of these two. And someone would ask, how would Fatima be better than the prophets? And she's not a prophet. Yes, you spoke about several points that Amir al-Mu'mineen shared with Harun alayhi salam, but there's one thing that he doesn't share with Harun, which is prophethood. Then how do you claim that Ali or Fatima are better than the prophets? And they are not prophets. We say that these statuses that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives to these individuals are not statuses only in the dunya or like a certain maqam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He gives the status to someone, it means he's eligible to be in that status. He has the proper characteristics and the recommended characteristics to be a prophet. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if it's recommended or if it's needed for this person to be a prophet in the dunya, then he would be a prophet. We say that Amirul Mu'mineen had the characteristics and the enough characteristics for him to be a prophet, but there was no need for him to be a prophet because the last prophet was Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The same way we look at Imam al-Hasan, he had enough characteristics to be at the Imam, but there was no need for him to be the Imam in the presence of Amirul Mu'mineen salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi. So they had the characteristics to make them prophets, but there is no need for them to be prophets. When we look at an individual like Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam, we are supposed to count to 10 before comparing her to anyone else or comparing her tragedies to anyone else. We can't say that the event of Karbala is merely historical and we learn from it, but we will not be asked about it on the Day of Judgment because we weren't there. And we cannot say that the attack on Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam is merely a historical event and we will not be asked about it because we weren't there. An individual like that, what we received of the historical events about Karbala or about the attack on the house, let alone the status of the individuals that were attacked and who they were attacked by. They were killed by Muslims, people who claimed to be Muslims. People that you would be surprised that they would do such a thing. That's why if you look at it from every corner, you will realize that this tragedy cannot be compared to any other tragedy. So, to summarize our points, these individuals that came and held the burden of the message of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, which provided the characteristics to make you eligible for anything in this life. And people tried to kill them. People killed them. People are trying to change their teachings and they succeeded somehow. Nowadays, we look at the standards, how they are changed, and then we are supposed to stick to the standards that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi brought. We ask Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala to grant us the tawfiq to get to know the status of Muhammadin wa Ali Muhammad salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi, and to help us through the times of misconception and the times of the test. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to hasten the appearance of Sahib al-Asr wa zaman. عجل الله تعالى فرجه الشريف. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين، ولتعجيل الفرج واستجابة الدعاء وقبول الأعمال وقضاء الحوائج وشفاء المرضى، ولأرواح أموات المؤمنين والمؤمنات من مات على الإيمان نهد الجميع ثواب ما قرأنا وثواب المباركة الفاتحة مع الصلوات.